Be honest. Do you have bags to be dropped off at the thrift store in your trunk right now? Or a pile of things at home that need to be gotten rid of somehow? Then this episode is for you. Welcome to Sustainable in the Suburbs, a podcast for the eco-curious who want to live a greener life and are looking for a place to start. I'm your host, Sarah Robertson Barnes, a soccer mom with a station wagon and a passion for sustainable living. Each week, I'll bring you practical tips and honest conversations to help you waste less, save money, and make small, doable shifts that actually fit your real life. Because sustainable living doesn't have to be perfect to matter, and you don't have to do it all to make a difference. Hello, and welcome back to Sustainable in the Suburbs, the podcast where we start where we are, use what we have, and live a little greener, one small shift at a time. My name is Sarah, and I'm glad we're hanging out for a bit today. This show is made possible by listeners like you. So if you've been enjoying the show, one of the best ways to support it is to share an episode with your friends or on social media. That really helps new folks to find us. You can also leave a quick rating or a review wherever you're listening today, or come and connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Sarah Robertson Barnes. You can also head over to sustainableinthesuburbs.com/podcast, where you can find all of the episodes and their show notes. And please do get in touch to suggest topics or guests that you'd love to hear in the future. And as always, you can find links to everything that I'm talking about today down in the show notes. So today, I would like to talk about decluttering. And I'm very aware that this episode isn't landing in the first week of January when the urge, or I guess at least the marketing to declutter typically hits. And that's intentional. I didn't want to add to the clutter of decluttering advice that shows up all at once every year. There's already enough decluttering nonsense out there, especially the kind that treats it as something to get it over with and then you're done forever. I think there's a pretty common expectation that decluttering should be conclusive. You just have to find the right system. One in, one out. Does it spark joy? Do a packing party, clear it out, drop it off, feel relieved, and then just move on. But what I want to do today is really slow down on all of that advice for a bit. Because something that I keep noticing in my own life and in the way that I guess we even talk about sustainability more broadly is that decluttering is treated as something separate from the buying cycle, as if it's a pause or a conclusion from consumption instead of part of it. And I don't think that it is. So one idea that I've been sitting with lately is this. Donation dumps are basically reverse shopping halls. They give us a sense of resolution and relief, maybe even that same kind of dopamine hit that buying does, and that feeling of having done something good. And that feeling is reinforcing. It makes the cycle easy to repeat. When we pause long enough to notice that pattern, it can feel really uncomfortable. But I also think that's where a lot of insight can live. Because if we don't look closely at how things leave our homes, we're missing an important part of the story. As I said in a recent episode on clothing swaps, donation has become part of the buying cycle. Buying less is only half of that conversation. And so looking closely at decluttering can complete that loop. When letting things go is easy, frictionless, bringing new things in often stays that way too. And this is something that people only start to notice after they've already made changes elsewhere. So after we've already started buying less and shopping secondhand and thinking more carefully about waste as a whole. So today I want to spend some time in that in-between space, looking at what happens when we slow the exit of our stuff, just enough to build that awareness muscle. So we live inside systems that make buying and discarding fast and easy. And I know we didn't design those systems, but we do have to move through them every day. And paying attention to how we move through them, we can quietly change what comes next. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Something that really shapes how we declutter and how we feel about it is the language we use around letting things go. So around 10 or so years ago, I guess, is when both zero waste and minimalism sort of blew up in the mainstream. And there was, and there is, a lot of overlap in those two movements. but some of the language of popular minimalists never really sat right with me. So I heard a lot of things like toss it, discard it, get rid of it, or just donate it. And those phrases are very efficient. They let us move on quickly, mentally. But what they also do is create distance. They make it really easy not to think about what happens to that stuff next. And I think that distance shows up in a couple of really common ways. One is the assumption that everything gets a second life, that if something goes to the thrift store, it will be resold, reused, rehomed, repurposed, end of story. The other is kind of the opposite. We just want to get something out of the house. And once it's gone, we don't really think about it again. Out of sight, out of mind. And neither of those really reflects reality, because that stuff doesn't disappear when it leaves our homes. It just moves. It moves through donation systems, to sorting facilities, to resale markets, to shipping containers overseas, and finally into incinerators and landfills, where, of course, it pollutes the air and soil and water. And this is where I always think of that Annie Leonard quote from The Story of Stuff that I've had pinned on my Instagram for years, which is, "There is no such thing as a way. When we throw something away, it must go somewhere." And that's true whether something ends up being donated or recycled or shipped overseas or landfilled. The moment it leaves our house, it doesn't stop existing. It just enters a system that we don't usually see. And I think we're often encouraged to treat decluttering as the end of the relationship. Once something's out of our home, it's dealt with, closed, resolved. And that kind of framing is comforting because it lets the story end neatly at the end of the curb or at the donation bin. But when that relationship ends that cleanly, then we don't think about what happens to it next. Now, thinking about the full life cycle of our stuff also isn't meant to turn decluttering into an ordeal or send us down a million rabbit holes every time we want to let something go. Rethinking a big donation dump is not meant to mire us in guilt or have us figuring out how to recycle our underwear, but rather to build our mindfulness muscle, to both slow down how we let things go and how we bring in new or new to us things. So over time, we will start to pay more attention to our items during their entire life cycle in our homes. And that's the work here. So I want to stay here for a moment and just sort of pause and let's talk about donation, because donation isn't bad, but it also isn't neutral. And this is usually where things get a bit more complicated, because I think most people donate with genuinely good intentions. Truly, I do. We want things to stay in use. We want to support our communities. And in many cases, donation does do that. Some thrift stores are charities. Some support local programs or social services. Others are for-profit resale businesses. And sometimes those things can overlap and it's a bit cloudy. But it's worth having a basic sense of who you're donating to and how they operate, because where your stuff goes and who profits from it shapes what the donation actually does in the world. There's also the reality of the sheer volume of stuff being donated. Donation systems are overwhelmed. Thrift stores and sorting facilities are receiving far more than they can realistically process or sell. And a lot of what gets donated never even makes it out onto the floor. It's either discarded immediately or bundled and shipped elsewhere. Only about 10 to 20% of donated clothing is actually resold in thrift shops in the US, with a larger portion, about 40 to 50%, exported overseas. In Ghana's Kantamanto market, for example, only about 40% of the imported secondhand clothing ends up being resold. The remainder is often discarded or burned. And if you want to learn more about that, I cannot recommend the book Consumed by Aja Barber or her Patreon enough. I will link both of those for you in the show notes. The flip side, of course, is that donation dumps still feel really good. There's relief in loading up that garbage bag, and there's closure in dropping things off. And there's that sense of having done something responsible and having it handled. And that feeling matters because it does teach us something. donation acts as a pressure valve. It lets us release the discomfort of having too much stuff without sitting with the bigger questions for very long. And this is where I want to introduce a shift, where a little bit of friction here is actually useful. When rehoming our stuff isn't as easy as filling a garbage bag, when it requires a bit of thought and time and coordination, it slows us down just enough to notice what we're doing. And that slowness can create learning. Not because I'm trying to make decluttering harder, but because friction gives us feedback. It allows us to stay present a bit longer. And over time, that changes not just how we donate, but how we buy. Another quote that I think about a lot, and I think I've mentioned it on the show several times before, is from William McDonough. Sustainability takes forever, and that's the point. So let's spend some time now talking about what slower, more mindful decluttering actually looks like in real life. These are just the kinds of options that open up when we stop trying to clear out everything at once, when we're not rushing to make it disappear, but paying attention to how things leave our home. So with all that in mind, here are some of the ways that slowing down our decluttering can work. First, offering items up within your own network. So this might look like passing things along to friends, family, neighbors, school communities, or your local Buy Nothing group. When items move this way, there's often more connection and more follow through. You know who it's going to, and you know it's likely to get used. And very often those items stay in use locally instead of disappearing into a much larger system. And I will say this, if you think nobody will want your thing, post it to your Buy Nothing group. You will be surprised. I have never not had someone pick something up. Next is swapping. You can swap clothing of all kinds, whether it's prom dresses or work basics or Halloween costumes, toys, sports equipment. Swaps are the best. These tend to be about both the stuff itself and building stronger community relationships. Swaps reinforce abundance. That you no longer need might be exactly what someone else does. And they slow down the whole cycle in a way that is social instead of transactional. So definitely go listen to episode 36 for a walkthrough on how to swap with your network. Next, have you ever seen that meme that says something like, all that clutter used to be money? It could be again, but attempting to sell our items also reinforces realism about value. So not what we paid or what we think something should be worth, but what someone will be actually willing to pay for it. And of course, selling takes time. You got to answer messages, the interminable "is this still available" message, waiting, deciding whether something is worth the effort to sell. But that time is also feedback, and that will carry forward into future purchases. Like, what am I going to do with this item when I don't want it anymore? Will it have resale value, etc.? So resale is a great option for things like furniture, collectibles, appliances, and higher end clothing. So definitely check out platforms like Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji here in Canada, Poshmark, Vinted, and of course, the old standby, eBay. Next is my personal favorite, repurposing. Could this thing be something else? So sometimes slowing down on getting rid of stuff can actually create some space for creativity. An item might be useful in a different way or serve a new purpose. So for example, I got a few zippered mesh lingerie bags that came with some bras I ordered, even though I asked them not to send them. But I have them, and I ended up just making them into reusable produce bags. Pinterest can be really useful for ways to upcycle items as well. But again, this is where discernment really matters. Not everything can have a second life, and the line between reusing and repurposing and hoarding can become a bit blurry at times. And yes, maybe I'm thinking about my jar collection here a little bit, but part of mindful decluttering is learning where is that line between this could be something else and will it be? But just maybe have a little noodle on that if it's something that could maybe serve you in a different way. The next option is donating. Yep, Donating. After everything I've already said about it, donating is often the right call. The difference is just slowing down and being intentional about where it is needed and likely to be used. So this is a much more active form of donating rather than a passive drop-off. So you will have to do some research first and get in contact with your local organizations to see what they need. So just a few examples. Tools can be donated to a local tool library, library of things, or your high school woodshop. Your sporting equipment. Check with local organizations to see if they do an exchange program or something similar. So, for example, our youth soccer club has an area that you can just drop off your old cleats and you can just take a new pair since kids go through them so quickly. And it's literally just a big shoe rack when you go into the sports dome. Construction materials can also be donated. So consider donating to Habitat for Humanity or their Restore chain or a similar organization in your area. For bed linens and towels, animal shelters often accept these, but definitely call first. There's even a pig rescue near me who often accepts crib mattresses for the animals. So just do a little Googling and see what's needed around you for your local animals. Clothing, of course, we can donate that. But first, look into local shelters, resettlement programs, or employment nonprofits. They may be in need of specific items for their clients, so have a look there. Books and magazines may be able to be donated at either the public library, local schools, hospitals, retirement homes. But again, get in touch first. Art and craft supplies can be donated. Again, check with local schools or childcare centers. Toiletries. Take a look under your bathroom sink and see what you have. I guarantee there are lots of unopened personal care products in there that you are unlikely to use. So check with your local food pantries or shelters as they may be in need of specific items as well. And of course, food. If you have non-perishables that are unexpired, local food pantries, shelters, and other nonprofits may accept your extra food items. So call ahead and check your items carefully to meet their requirements. And finally, we come to recycling and trash. Some things will just not have a second life. Some things are genuinely worn out, broken beyond repair, or at the end of their usefulness. Some items are just destined for landfill, no matter how hard we try. And being honest about that matters too. Not everything can be saved, and pretending otherwise doesn't help. So instead, use this as an opportunity to refamiliarize yourself with your local waste diversion rules, especially for recycling and compost. There's also items like old paint, batteries, light bulbs, cooking oil, etc., that may need to be taken to a special drop-off location. So let your friends and family know that you have an intended drop-off day and offer to take theirs as well. So these are a lot of alternatives to a typical donation dump, but I genuinely think that they are better for our local communities as a whole and for us to think more deeply about our stuff. I'm also very aware that this looks different depending on where you live and what you have access to and what systems you're dealing with. So if you have thoughts about donation or other ways that you let go of things that I haven't mentioned here or that work differently where you live, I'm always interested in hearing about them. So you can email me or DM me or just reach out however you usually connect with the show. And finally, of course, even after all the options above, some things just have to go straight into the trash. There's a real temptation, especially in these sustainability spaces, to look for a useful ending for everything. A second life, a perfect outcome, and it's just not there. Some things are legitimately worn out. Things these days are just not built to last. Some things have just reached the end of the line, and some things just have to be thrown in the trash. What matters is what we carry forward to the next time we are deciding to buy something. And over time, that honesty will lead to a clearer sense of what's actually worth bringing into our homes. So what all of this keeps coming back to, for me, is a shift from disposal to stewardship. Decluttering is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing relationship with the things we choose to bring into our homes and live with and eventually let go of. So for this week's One Small Shift, I want to make this ask of you. Look into your community-based solutions. Join your Buy Nothing group if you haven't already. Find out what items your local food pantry or resettlement program needs, and let that guide you. That kind of attention tends to carry forward, and over time, it will shape how you acquire things in the first place. So if you have thoughts about donation, decluttering, or how this looks for you, please do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, start where you are, use what you have, and live a little greener. Thanks for tuning in to Sustainable in the Suburbs. Every small step adds up, and I'm so glad we're doing this together. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow the show, share it with a friend, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me at sustainableinthesuburbs.com or at Sarah Robertson Barnes on all the things. Until next time, start where you are, use what you have, and live a little greener.
This podcast is produced, mixed, and edited by Cardinal Studio. For more information about how to start your own podcast, please visit www.cardinalstudio.co or email Mike at mike@cardinalstudio.co. You can also find the details in the show notes.